We're going to take a journey. I'm going to talk about the joys of stress. Wouldn't you like to be that bird, all right? Well, let me tell you, there's some people out there that are really off track. I was speaking to the Department of Labor, the national conference, about a month and a half ago. I didn't believe it at first, but then after they said it absolutely was true. They were showing how crazy people are getting. They were showing some of the excuses that people had for not coming into work. And I asked, could I get a list of them? And there was a list of about 75 of them. But here are some of them right here, okay? You know, sometimes I think it's time to thin the herd. I really do. You know, because we got some crazy people out there. One person said, last night I got drunk and woke up with a stranger in my bed. So I think I need to stay home and take time to get to know him. Woo-wee! Okay. All right. I'm not coming in today because I need a mental day. Yeah, that's pretty simple, okay? But it gets worse, okay? I can't make it in today. I have a chance of filling in for someone on jury duty. Think about it. This side's faster over here. You know, think about that, okay? Here's another one I love. I can't come into work today. I plan to stalk my previous boss for firing me for not showing up for work. Sonny, I hope that wasn't one of your people. All right. I can't make it in today. Constipation has made me a walking time bomb. I guess it would be, all right. Here it gets worse. I won't be in work for today. My wife said she's going to conceive today, and I want to be there when it happens. These are true. Honest to God, they're true. They're crazy, but they're true. And this is one of my favorites right here. When I got up this morning, I took an X-Lax along with my Prozac. I can't get off the John, but I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Tell me it's not time to thin the herd, okay? All right, all right. The question is, who can think about tomorrow? Well, I'm just having trouble getting through today. All right? That's the one thing I've seen more than anything. I was there in '84, the farm crisis. I did farm crisis counseling back then, and some of you probably remember that, a lot of young people. And that's another blessing about this group. The age difference is just incredible. I see the young tigers and, you know, and the old farts, and it's really kind of a with young hearts, okay? You know, and what a great group. But the one thing I have seen over all those years and doing all those annual cooperative meetings and stuff like that, I've seen a lot of stress that was never there before. And I think in some ways, we're getting off track, okay? The number one source of stress in America today, I believe, can be summed up in one single word, and it's this: uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty that's come in to everybody's life, not just ag, but especially ag. And let me give you some examples of those, okay? These are things, a lot of these things, a couple of them were here before, but not many of them, all right? For farmers, uncertainty today include crop prices. You know, we don't know about the crop prices, you know, and they get frustrating. I was speaking to the South Dakota Corn Growers Association, and during the break I was out in the lobby, and this was like a year before last or whatever it was. And this one guy was there, and he was really kind of angry, and he was talking to the other guy. He was so mad. And I kind of like to, you know, I wanted to know if he was talking about me. But I got over there, and he was talking about beans, the price of beans. He said he was just so mad. He said he had sold 800 bushels of beans. He said, I sold them for $11. He said they went up to $12 the next day. I just made one of the biggest. How many years ago would it have been? If you got $11 a bushel for beans, you'd be pretty happy. But with that price jumping all over the place, you don't know. U.S. farm policy. You know, are we going to get one? Everybody's worried about that. I teach a leadership class at Cornell University in Ithaca for the dairy people every year. And you talk about them, I mean, they just don't know what's going to happen here, and they don't know how they're going to handle it. But continue down. Explosive technologies, my gosh. You know, the young guys, I mean, these young tigers, they love this stuff. They just love it. They eat it up. And believe me, the new technologies are the way of the future, and you have to, it's part of the change and it's part of the chaos. But there are so many things that can be provided for you to be more trusted, you know, counselors for your clients, but you got to be able to dance with them. But a lot of people are afraid of that. They don't know how to deal with it. It creates stress in their lives. Land values. 2 weeks ago, I live in Clear Lake, Iowa. 2 weeks ago, we had a farm that sold for $21,000 an acre. Now, somebody please tell me how anybody's going to make a living off of that. Yeah, cash rent maybe, who knows, but that creates a lot of stress. Global competition. We didn't have global competition 30, 40 years ago. It wasn't a big factor, but today it is. We have other things. Corporate farming, you know. I do a program, and I'm asked, has the American farm family died? I say, no, it hasn't died. It's transitioning. It's becoming a little different what it was. You know, if there was a family farm, it was my grandfather's farm. I remember being out there. I remember cutting heads off those chickens and would make bets how long they'd run around before they finally flopped. And Grandma would take the feathers, and I remember that meat underneath that big crock under the stairway. I mean, there were fruit orchards. There were all kinds of things going on, and that was a pretty much self-sustained farm. And then we got into specialty ag, and that changed. But you know, those changes bother a lot of people, and we're going toward corporate farms. Special interest groups attacking. Let me tell you something, people. There's some well-funded, very intelligent people out there who are ready to take a bite out of you. It's not just PETA. There's some other ones as well. You know, I'm telling farmers. I love this. Remember that good old gospel song? We've a story to tell to the nation. I'm trying to get farmers to tell their story instead of fighting internally. Sometimes I think it's like the old NFO days back in the 60s. I mean, small farmers against big farmers, it's unbelievable. I'm trying to find some organizations, a couple of, four big companies. I've picked an ad. How many people know who Toby Keith is? All right. This is my ad. Toby Keith walks into a supermarket. There's a camera up above shining down on him. And he says to the camera, do you have any idea what this store would look like without the American farmer? And the camera cuts to a woman picking up a couple of jugs of milk, and poof, all the dairy disappears. Another man is reaching for a roast from the meat department, and poof, all the meat disappears. A little kid goes over to pick up some pop, and poof, all the sugar products disappear. And in 20 seconds, the store is almost empty. The camera comes back to Toby Keith, and he said, now remember, the next time you walk into a supermarket, realize it's here because the commitment and the sacrifice of the American farmer who considers providing this as his legacy to the world. You have a story to tell to the nation, okay? But that's creating some stress. Secession planning was never a big thing before, but now I do a lot of programs and sit down, and talk about secession planning between generations. There's generations don't. I do a program on generational communication. I mean, I'm an old traditionalist, And I tell people in sales, if you are a traditionalist and you're out there talking to one of those hot dog young kids, I mean, he's not going to want to traditionally sit down and have lunch with you. He doesn't want to see this portfolio of stuff. He wants you to email. He wants you to text. He wants you to stay on the cutting edge. And I've had some guys say, oh, I can't do that. I'm going to tell you something. I saw a company 2 years ago that came up with a new core value, and this is what they wrote in their core value. If you can't teach an old dog new tricks, maybe it's time to take the dog to the vet. Yeah. I saw a 97-year-old woman on a cherry farm in Traverse City, Michigan, call up the local credit conference and tell them to get their stuff together because she's getting tired of trying to communicate with them. She didn't want to drive into town every day if they couldn't get on the line and they couldn't do things right, or they couldn't do she said if she can do it at 97, so can they. But for some people, that's a lot of sex. That's all. And generational conflicts. That's just some of the things of what's creating stress today. Now, how do we find the joys? The changing weather patterns. Are we really in a major change? Are we going to see things different? I don't know. But it's creating a lot of stress. I mean, my gosh, I live in northern Minnesota. I mean, northern Iowa. And I'll tell you, northern Iowa and southern Minnesota, we have a lot of fields that weren't touched this year. Nothing went into the ground, and the climate is part of that. But we're going to deal with that later. Uncertainty will always be a part of taking charge of a process. All right. I love Warren Buffett said, if I had allowed uncertainty to control my life, I would not have achieved much of anything in my life. Think about that. He said his success came by embracing uncertainty. He didn't fight it. He didn't look at it as an ogre. I had this wonderful conversation I'll never forget. I'm not a financial man, never have been. I have no idea how much money I got in the bank. My wife takes care of all that. I haven't seen our family checkbook in 8 months, all right? You know, she just tells me when to work harder, and she's been telling me that a lot lately, okay? I'm at a leadership conference banquet, and I'm speaking to about 3,000 people. And we're at the head table, and the ovens broke down. And they said, they came out and announced, you know, we'll be out 45 minutes late. Please, we're sorry. Enjoy having conversations with people around you. And I'm sitting there, and I turned to this guy next to me, and I said, I'm David Okerlund. I'm doing the keynote address tonight. He stuck out his hand, and he said, I'm Warren Buffett, and I'm here to welcome people. The name went right over my head. I didn't know who he was. I looked at him, and I said, and who do you work for? Sitting next to one of the richest men in the world. He said, have you ever heard of Berkshire Hathaway? And I thought that was like Tom and Jerry's ice cream. And I almost said, you know, I've had the chocolate, and I really like that, but thank God I didn't. I had this wonderful conversation, all right? Within every uncertainty lies a seed of potential waiting to sprout. That's where the dynamic be. And that's where you're going to find the joys of being able to dance with these items, okay? So what do we need to do, not just to cope with stress of uncertainty, but also take command of it? And that's, I'm going to give you something, some simple things. You've probably heard it before, but in combination, they can make a difference in anybody's life, all right? Number one, life can be a tumor without a sense of humor. If you can't make it better, you can laugh at it, Irma Bombeck said. Humor is the glue that binds our family together. You know, and we are getting a little more and more sensitive about humor. You know, I tell you what, you know, and it's true. How many Norwegians do we have in here? Raise your hand. None? Oh my God. We got any Hawkeye fans in here? You know? Well, I tell you what. We are the only ethnic race in America today. And it's true. The only ethnic race left in America today that doesn't mind having stories told about them. And I don't know whether it's because we don't understand them or because we're all true. But I got in trouble about 3 months ago. I have one of my favorite stories about Ole and Sven. And Ole came into the bar. Sven was the bartender, and Ole was sitting there, and he was drinking beer and watching the 6 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news. And Sven came over and he said, Ole, he said, what are you doing? He said, I'm just watching the 10 o'clock news. And he said, well, what's on the news? He said, well, there's a guy on top of a 10-story building in Indianapolis who's threatening to jump off the building. Sven said, I'll tell you what, Ole. He said, I'll bet you $20 that man jump off the building in the next 10 seconds. Ole thought that was a good bet, so he took out $20 and he slapped it down the table. 5 seconds after he slapped it down the table, the guy jumped off the building, fell 10 stories, and splat right into the asphalt. You know, Sven picked up the $20, went back to the bar, and about 10 minutes later he came back and he said, Ole, he said, I just have to give you back your $20. Ole said, why? He said, you won the bet. He said, yeah. He said, I won the bet, but he said, I got to tell you, I cheated a little bit. I saw that on the 6 o'clock news. Ole said, yumpin' Yemeni, so did I, but I didn't think you'd do it again. You think it's a pretty harmless joke, but I had a person criticize me for that. Said I shouldn't be doing that anymore. So, you know, like the old saying goes, if you can't be Norwegians, they'll turn them into Hittites. You got any Hittites in here? All right. But I challenge people. I love this. Husband's Daycare Center. Need time to relax, need time to yourself, want to go shopping, leave your husband with us and we'll look after him, and you only have to pay for his drinks. Yeah, that's on a bar in Minnesota, okay? Somebody's got a sense of humor, you know? And the word humor, the Greek term, comes from the Greek term humor, which means to flow. And today we'd get a lot of stress out of our lives if it would just flow a little bit. When's the last time you went out and bought a good humor book? You know, and you shared that? If you haven't done it, there's a lot of great humor. You go on the internet and ask, you know, type in into Google, farm humor. And I'll guarantee you, in 3-4 minutes, you're going to have tears rolling out of your eyes, some of the stories. But that kicks in the endorphins and a lot of other stuff and makes a lot of joy coming. I tell people, here, I'm going to test you out. Take a look at this. There's a cannon. There's some empty boots in front of the cannon. I opaqued out the comments underneath. Anybody want to take a crack at this? What should that say underneath there? Huh? Whoops. I think he said hire, not fire. You know, I never liked those human service people. You know, I have a friend, a young man who's a salesman for chemicals, Mid-Central Chemical, and he sends these cartoons out without the captions. He sends them out to his clients and then throws in a 5-gallon bucket of chemicals, whoever comes up with the best one. I did talk to Boeing Military Aircraft, and they did it, and it was so successful, it changed their attitudes, it changed their performance and tenure and everything else, and it went so well. They did this on a bi-weekly basis that at the end of 1 year, they brought in the editor of the Kansas City Star, and they picked the best humorist in their organization, and they gave him a 1-week paid vacation for 4 people because of the power of humor. If you want to deal with stress, learn how to laugh a little bit more. Here's another one. Can you come up with that one? Has it stopped spinning yet? No. Make sure you take 5 pounds off for the towel, honey. Huh? I was doing a thing for Alpo Food one time, and there was a group, I shouldn't really say this, but I will say it. There was a group of women, and they were just laughing. And I would ask them what they wrote down, and they didn't want to tell me. And finally, they told me. They'd written down underneath there, such a little car for such a big garage. Okay, I'm sorry. I was doing a humor workshop out in Denver, Colorado one time. There were a bunch of nurses, and they were cardiac intensive care and oncology, and they were under a lot of stress. And before they could go to break, they had to write down for this one here. And everybody was pointing to this little nurse. She must have been about 65 years old. And she wouldn't volunteer. It's the only time I've ever looked at anybody's notes when they went out for coffee. And I wrote, if you knew this person, she would bring more sunshine into your life than you can imagine. Because underneath there, she wrote these words. Edith, you absolutely have to do something about your dandruff. Talk about a humor vision, okay? All right. Number 2, don't try to hide the child inside. That's a silly, isn't that a silly statement for a speaker to make, telling you not to hide the child inside? But let me tell you something. There's been incredible documented studies done. I wrote a poem one time that goes like this. When I was but a child, the world was a wonderful place, so full of many treasures of goodness, love, and grace. I could dream like Walter Mitty. I was a cowboy. I was crowned a king. I became a crazy, lazy hobo, and I could do most anything. But then growing older, there came a saddening day when hearing a different drummer, I was taught another way. That men don't dream of foolish things, of puppy dogs and cows that sing. And I forgot the joy so dear. The treasured moments, the lack of fear, and sadly accepting society's ban, I deserted the child to become the man.